to AADA25 Vray course for our LTH students, where we're going to look into Vray, right? Vray for Rhino. So this course is going to be all about just giving you a broad understanding on how Vray works and what you can do with it. And as per usual, we'll be doing a small project to kind of get you started with using Vray. So right here, what you see on the screen is just a project that I'll be working on and something that I'll be rendering out. But before we begin with this, I think we should start even simpler. So I will just select everything here and I'll just hide it for a bit. Hide. And let's get started from the scratch. So actually, where's my grid? Oh, it is showing the grid. So let me just see where the hell my grid is. Yeah, there we go. So the first thing is, how do you actually get the Vray toolbar and so on? So some of you might not see this toolbar here. So let me just close it and let's just imagine that, actually, this needs to be here. Let's just imagine that you don't see anything that says Vray on it, but you have installed the plugin. It's necessary to install a plugin before you actually use the plugin. So let's say you have the plugin, but you don't see anything about Vray here. Then what you do is you go to the render tab here in the top, or render toolbox. You get this drop-down list and you find current render and you choose Vray for Rhino instead of Rhino default or Rhino render, right? You choose Vray for Rhino. And then in your case, it might pop up a bunch of stuff, right? So the only tab that you need that is going to be popped up is going to be called Vray compact. Everything else you can just close down. If you don't see anything popping up, that's fine as well. We can go to, remember where, I think it's here. So in this top right corner, you can see this gearbox icon. You click on it, or gear icon, you click on it, you choose show toolbar, and then you scroll down like crazy until you see Vray for Rhino, and here you can choose to tick mark Vray compact. Bam. There we go, Vray compact. And then let's just dock it. I really like to have it docked here. So when you drag it, it just docks to the side. Right, so Vray. Vray is a physics-based render engine, meaning that it's true to reality. And in having a physics-based render engine, you are kind of saying that, let me rephrase. When you have a Vray physics-based engine, or when you have any kind of rendering physics-based engine, it's much harder to break it and to make a stylized render, something that doesn't follow the rules of reality, right? So if you're looking for more stylized rendering methods, so let's say you want to do some sort of a manga or anime style renders, it is possible to do it with Vray, but it's much easier to do them with other render engines such as Arnold or Cycles, right? So Vray is more about hyper-realistic images. So here in this toolbox, Vray compact toolbox, the first icon that you see is Vray asset editor. And once you click on it, it's going to open it up. And this is basically where most of the tools in terms of, and most of the settings in terms of Vray are, right? And all of the materials, all of the lights, all of the textures can be adjusted through the Vray asset editor, and it should be adjusted through asset editor. Let's just kind of have a quick look at it. The first thing is this row of icons right here. The first icon is materials. Right now we don't have any materials, right? We haven't created any. So if I click on it, it's just going to ask me what kind of material would you like to create. If you have any materials already created, it's going to kind of show you them. Since we don't, it just asks us to create one. I'll do that in just a second. but that's basically, yeah, that's Vray material editor. Then we have lights, and here when I click on lights, I can see Rhino document sun is being listed and it is disabled. So this icon right here is grayed out. If I click on it, now it's on, now it's off, right? So by default, the sun is turned off, right? So basically what this tells me is that I don't have any lights in the scene except for the sun, and even the sun is turned off, right? So there shouldn't be any light whatsoever. And that is not going to be the case when we start like the first render. It's not going to be the case. We will have a little bit of light here. And I'll talk about that, why we have some light there in just a second. But according to the lights, we should have a completely black view when we render it out. Then we have geometry. So this is like Vray, custom Vray geometry. So Vray can have proxies. I'll talk about proxies in later stages of the project. They're a little bit more advanced. And it can have Vray clipping planes. So it's basically the same thing as a clipping plane in Rhino, only that it's in Vray. So you can render out something that is being clipped, something that is being cut, and also infinite planes. So a surface that is infinite in size, that is also a part of Vray's toolbox, right? So those would live here in the geometry tab. Then we have layers or render elements. This is basically for the output. So when you output a render, when you kind of save a render, you can also save as a separate file. You can save all of the reflections of that render within that render as a separate layer that later on you can add in Photoshop to kind of increase the effect of reflections. So this is somewhat helpful if you want to really go into nitty-gritty of customizing your renders. But for this course, I think we will be using a few, but definitely not all of them. It's too many. We don't need to look at all of them. Then we have textures. So this is basically if you just use some sort of imagery that you downloaded from the internet, some sort of an image texture, it's going to pop up here, right? So you can kind of look at the files that are being linked to Vray through here. I don't really use it that much. I usually access the textures through the materials that actually use those textures. Probably should tell you, texture and material are two different things. A material is a much bigger thing that actually is attached to the geometry, and the material might or might not use a texture. It's anywhere, okay? So texture is just a small part that makes up a material, but the material has much more information incorporated in it, and it is something that is directly linked to the geometry, right? So you can think of it as stages of probably complexity, for the lack of a better word. Then we have settings. So these are all of the rendering settings that you will see. And these settings kind of talk about what kind of quality do you want to get out of your render, what kind of camera settings do you have, what kind of size of the render do you want to have, and so on. And I'll come back to settings really quickly, but not now. Just bear with me for a second. Last two items here are render with Vray icon. Right now I don't really have anything in the scene, so let me just do a box real quick so that we can actually render something out. If I click on this render icon here, wait a bit, it's going to render out a box for me, right? And remember when I said that there shouldn't be any lighting? And there is lighting, right? It should be we don't have any lights. And the material is not glowing, so why does it render out with lights? Well, and also there's a gradient in the back. Well, the reason for that is because the environment tab here under settings, environment, the environment tab is using texture for the background. And that texture shines light in our scene. So I can kind of show you the texture, but before we do that, let me just kind of explain how things work in Vray. So you can see here background is black, and the intensity of the background is set to 1. So 1 is like the default intensity. So you might think that the background should be black, right? Because it's the color that's black, but no. This icon right here that is blue means that there is some sort of a texture that is being used instead of the color, right? So if I were to tick mark this or untick this, so that the texture is not used, right? So this tick mark means that the texture is not going to be used if it's not ticked. Then the background is going to be actually the black color, right? So it's going to use the color instead of the texture. So now if I render it again, I can see that my scene is completely black, right? There's no light whatsoever. So the only thing that shined light was the background. I can show you the background here. I have tick marked this. I can show you the background here by clicking on this icon. Wait a bit. And it's going to kind of show me what kind of a image is being used for the background. So this is what's called a HDRI image, a 360-degree image that is wrapping around our scene, right? So it's this kind of a, you can think of it as a sphere, as a spherical projection, right? That is shining light in our scene from all of the sides. So that gradient that we saw was from, it was from this image. If I render this again, you will actually see. So see this gradient here? So this is like a portion of this image, maybe somewhere here or something like that, that is being stretched out to wrap around the scene, right? Then this is how it works. Right. So that is basically it. Oh, by the way, there are these two icons here. This icon right here and this icon right here, that expand the tool set to the sides. I will talk about those in just a second. Just know that they are here and you can expand or contract them, right? Coming back here, so that's the background, right? That's basically how it works. For this particular example, and continuing working with this, I will be probably disabling the background and just using like completely black color so that we start with no lights whatsoever. Because I will want to explain how the lights work and so on. So in just a second, we will begin doing that. Okay, so let's start with the lights. That's the first thing that I'm going to do. Well, actually, I'm lying. The first thing that I'm going to do is create a very generic material. So when you don't have any materials assigned to the geometry, it's going to be rendered out as completely non-reflective, let's say not shiny, and completely white, right? So this texture that is currently assigned to this box is completely white texture, right? So I don't really want a completely white texture. Usually you don't want completely white color or completely black color on your materials because there's no geometry out there or in reality, no materials in reality that are completely white or completely black. So instead, let's do a gray material. And to do that, I will just close this render box here, and I will go to materials. I'll choose the generic type. So the generic type material is basically 99% of the materials can be created through generic type material. 1% will need to be like emissive two-sided, subsurface scattering, and so on. So one of these. We will kind of look into these in a bit, but for now, let's just do a generic one, right? So I create a new material, generic. By the way, afterwards, the next time you want to create a material, it's going to be right here, create asset, materials, and here you choose generic. So that's when you add another one. But basically we have generic material here. I'll double click on it on its name, and I'll rename it to box 1, whatever, box 1, right? So this is our material that we have created, and I will select it, select the box. I'll right click on the material and I'll choose apply to selection. That's it. It has been applied. And the thing is that we can't really see what kind of material we have, which is not nice, but this is where these handles on the left and right hand side are come in handy. So the right hand side handle, when I click on it, it will expand the properties of the selected material. Let me drag it down a bit. And it will show me all of the different settings that I can change. So I can change the diffuse, which is basically just the color. I can change the reflection, which is the reflection. Refraction is basically transparency, but the difference between refraction and opacity is that refraction actually changes the direction of the light when light is passing through it. So you can create lenses and stuff like that with refraction, while opacity is just this kind of a ghostly transparency, ghostly effect. So refraction is physically accurate transparency. And then we have coat, opacity, and blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about these a little bit later. So color, right? Let me render out this scene again. You can already see the color here, right? So the color changes. And if I change the color to red and render the scene again, I can either click here or here, doesn't matter. It's gonna turn red, right? So that's easy. But notice how I constantly need to click on the render button to get a new view. Well, you can automate this. And the way you do it is if you go to settings at the top, if you go to settings and you choose render here you can say that I want to use interactive rendering rather than regular, typical rendering. So interactive is used for adjusting the scene and kind of making changes and seeing in real time how do those changes affect the scene. So let me just turn it on. So I flip the switch. By the way, you can only turn it on when there is no rendering running, right? So you need to stop the render before you can actually do this. And then you can see that the icon changed here. So there's like a figure or the arm near the teapot. And there's the whole story why the render icon is the teapot. It comes from 3ds Max. Don't worry about it. It is a teapot, okay? So you click on it. And now it seems like it's the same thing, but if I rotate the scene, my render will automatically kind of follow along. And I can really see now the environment that I'm dealing with, right? Okay, so now let me go in here in the environment and turn off the background. So this is completely black and I don't see anything. So I will just stop the render for a bit. No need to look at the black screen. I just know that when I turn off the background, there's no more light left and I can kind of continue working on the scene in Rhino, creating lights. So let's do that. Well, actually red is a little bit obnoxious. So let me just do like middle gray, something like that. Okay, lights. So lights are created not through the Vray asset editor, so I can close it for a bit, but rather they are created through this toolbox here. And here in this toolbar, if I were to go through it from left to right, we have the Vray asset editor, so the big boy, where everything is kind of, all of the settings live here, all the materials live here. Then we have the render icon, and since I have chosen to do interactive rendering, this is going to be interactive render icon. If you want to do like a proper render, you can expand this and choose just the proper render icon here, just a teapot without the arm. Then we have batch renders. This is when you want to render out multiple cameras at the same time. We will not do that in this course, so don't worry about that part. V-Ray frame buffer is basically that window. This is like the fourth one. Yeah, that's basically that render window. So if you accidentally closed it, you can always open it up here. So then there is a light generator window. If you have an older version of V-Ray, you will not see this. If you have a new version of V-Ray, you will see this. I will talk about this in an hour or so, but for now, let's skip over it. And then you have the rectangle tool, sorry, rectangle tool. You have light rectangle tool, right? So this is like the default V-Ray light. If I expand this, I can see all of the different variations of how the light can be created. Some of them are useful, some of them are not. So the one that I mostly use is the rectangle light tool. The one that I mostly use for product rendering, as well as for the interior space rendering, is the V-Ray light tool. But in some cases, you kind of want to use like sphere light and whatnot. So I will kind of show all of them as well. But let's start with the rectangle tool, right? Rectangular light tool. I'll create it, and it's going to ask me to just draw the rectangle, right? So I'll just draw it like that. Just makes a rectangle which has a arrow sticking out of it, and that arrow shows the direction of the light, right? So I can, rotate it, move it up. Maybe we can have it vertical. So you work with it just like with any kind of geometry in Rhino. Something like that should do the trick. And now if I hit the interactive render icon here, I can see that the light is indeed shining on my box. It's nothing too fancy. Oh, by the way, you can't see the back side of the light source. You can only see the front side. That's just a thing that it does. But yeah, so it does work. There are settings that I can change in terms of the rectangular light. If I go to V-Ray Asset Editor and I go to lights, I can see this main rectangle light tool appear here. And I can choose to rename it. So I can name it as focus light. Focus light. I can expand this right-hand side part. And here I can change a bunch of settings of the focus light. So I can change its color to something like pink. I can change its intensity to either higher it or lower it, depending on what I see here, right, in the render tab. So if I'm currently rendering it, I can change the intensity to 500, and now it's a nuclear explosion, or I can change it to 5, and now it's super like dark, right? Usually you want to stick around the 100 intensity, and instead of changing it here, changing the light intensity itself, you want to go into settings, go to camera, and change the exposure value of the camera rather than changing the light intensity. Think about it this way. If you have sunlight, right, in your scene, so sun is shining on your model, and you want to go in there and change, and let's say the render is too bright, and you want to go in there and change the brightness, dim it down. In reality, you don't go and change the intensity of the freaking sun. You change the exposure of the freaking camera, right? So that's exactly what how we're going to be doing it here with in V-Ray, how we're going to work with it. So if I change the exposure value to something like 8, I can see that it becomes much brighter. If I change the exposure value to something like 12, 12, it's going to be darker, right? So this number right here corresponds to exposure. Exposure compensation. So you can mess around with the brightness of the scene here under settings, camera, exposure value. All right, coming back here, let me stop the render for a bit. So we have one light source. What if I want to do another one, right? Another one of these. Well, I can just create another rectangle light like so. I can take it, I can rotate it, move it up, go to settings, find it, call it flash, or not flashlight, but how do we call it? God damn it, there's a rim light. Rim light, you can call it that. I can give it a little bit of a bluish color here. So I can either change the color here or change the color here, doesn't matter. And I can give it intensity of 200 or maybe 150. Maybe this one can be 75 and that is 150. So much more intense than the focus light. I can click on render again, interactive render again. And now I can see I have two light sources, right? So that's another way of how to create light. Not another way, but that's how you add more lights. You just keep creating them. You can do what you can also do is you can take this light and just copy it either by using copy command or holding down the Alt key and dragging it. You can make a copy of it, and let me just rotate it. So maybe drag it out here, rotate it like so. So you can make a copy of it, but keep in mind that this and this will be treated by Vray as the same light. So you can see here, focus light is still, there's still only two lights here that are being registered in Vray Asset Editor, even though I made a copy here. So these two will share the same settings, right? So if I render it out and kind of take a look at it, so there's one light here and one light there, and both of them are going to be kind of this pinkish color, and both of them have the same settings. So if I change both of them, like intensity to 10, both sides change at the same time. To fix this, what you can do, let me stop the render. What you can do is you can select the copied light, go to properties, to its properties, and here there will be an icon that says, well, if you only see this, then click on this light icon here. Like that. So this is the light properties, and here you can, hello? Oh, no. Did I mess it up? So that's a bug. Yeah, that's definitely a bug. Made a boo-boo. That's fine. And that's also fine. Anyway, so don't mess around with those. That is bugged. But just if you select the light source and you go to properties, it will give you the Vray settings of it. And then you just click on make unique. And it's going to kind of make this into a unique light. And now if I go to Asset Editor, I can see that there's focus light number 1. So a copy of it created. So I can see focus light, the second, whatever, right? And I can change this to, let's say 25 and give it also like, let's say a more aggressive blue color, render this out. And now I can see that there's pink here, there's blue light coming in from the copied one, and that then there is this rim light coming in from the back, right? So I have 3 lights. Okay, so that is done. That is done. We have 3 lights. Let's make more cubes. So I'm just going to take this cube and kind of scale it down a bit and make a few a few copies of it. Maybe grab one more, create one more cube here as a table, something like that. Just kind of messing around with it, getting some sort of a testing place working. Hit the render button. This is how it looks like, right? So you can see that since I have been copying these cubes here, they inherit the material from the original, right? So all of them have the same material, while the one that I've created, bottom one is pure white, right? That's because it doesn't have any material. So I can create a material for it. And since we're not dealing with materials right now, I'll just use the same material, the same gray material. So I'll just apply the box one material to the bottom. And now all of these have the same material here. Okay, so that is rectangular lights. Let's look into more options. So the next one in this lights drop-down list is sphere light. So sphere light tool, basically, once you select it, you just need to draw out a sphere, right? It's going to create this little guy here. I can move it around as a sphere. And basically, when I hit the render button, there's my sphere light, right? So nothing too fancy, but I can go into settings, lights, or asset editor lights, find the sphere light, and I can change its intensity to like 500. Now it's an explosion. I can change its color to green, like some beautiful green, and now it's kind of shining horribly. Oh, by the way, when green light is overexposed, it shifts through the hue colors to become yellow. That is a little bit more advanced, but it is how it is. It is how it works, right? So that's a thing. That's a thing that happens. Let's come back to intensity of 100, maybe even less, 50. We have our green sphere floating and shining light. There's not much to do about it. One thing that I haven't talked to you about is these rectangular lights. Maybe you don't want to see them, right? Maybe they're in the way. So you can indeed hide them in the render. If I go to focus light, for instance, and I go to options here in the bottom of the focus light, there's a bunch of options that I can change for this light, but the one that you really want to take care of is the invisibility. So if you tick mark this, you can see, bam, immediately disappears. If I untick it, it's back here. So invisible means that it's not going to be rendered out in your scene. Same thing here, options, invisible, rim light, options, invisible. And I can even do this with sphere light as well, invisible. No. So no lights are being shown. So actually I want to see the sphere light. So that's how it works. Close that, stop that, move that, and maybe place this somewhere here so that it's not too much in the way. More lights. So the next one is a spotlight. And this one is actually something that I constantly, well, I don't struggle with it, but it's something that has an additional setting that I constantly need to change, and I have no idea why is the other setting not default. You'll see what I mean. So spotlight basically works as if you were drawing out a cone shape. So if I click once, then it's going to ask me to draw out a circle, okay? And then it's going to ask me, yo, where do you want your top of the cone to be, right? So I can kind of, I'll just click anywhere, it doesn't matter. It's going to lay the cone flat, that's whatever. I'll just then select this light tool here, hit F10 to get the control points, or you can type in points on. And then I can mess around with it and kind of place it anywhere I want. So let's say, first of all, it's going to start from, let's say here, doesn't matter. And then I'll just grab the center point here and just move it to the, let's say to this box here, something like so, maybe higher up, something like so, right? So that's our spotlight. And now if I hit render, I can see that the spotlight doesn't work, right? It doesn't shine light. And this is why we need to change one setting about it to make it work. I'll go to Vray Asset Editor, Spotlight. I'll select go to Light, Spotlight tool, expand it. And here you can see it's super narrow, like, and super, like, you barely can see it. That's because of the decay. So over distance in millimeters, it decays by a proportion of inverse square by default, meaning that when you are super close to the light source, it doesn't, well, it does shine light, but even if you move away by 5 millimeters from the light source, it decays drastically. So it reduces the intensity drastically. If instead of inverse square, we just use inverse, then this is much better. And we can kind of see it here, but not really. So let me just increase the intensity to like 500. And now you can definitely see it, right? So this is something that you need to be mindful of when dealing with spotlights. Then there's also a few more things about the spotlight. So there is this inner circle here in the base, which kind of talks about the hotspot. So this is where the light is 100% focused. And then there is another circle. So this is the fall off edge. So basically, this is 100%, this edge is 0%, and it creates a gradient of intensity from 100% to 0, right? So it kind of tapers off, and you can kind of see it happening here, right? From something that is quite intense to a fall off to 0. To fix that, or not to fix that, but to work with that, you can change the cone angle and penumbra angle. So the cone angle right now is 9. So if I say that the cone angle is actually 1, or well, 1, you can't really see 1. Let's do 5. You can see that the inner hotspot becomes much, much smaller. Let me go to wireframe view. So the inner hotspot becomes much, much smaller with 5 degrees of angle for the light. I can change this to back to 1, and you can see that now the hotspot is super small. In contrast, 50 will make it super wide, right? So I'll just do like 10, and that's fine. And then penumbra is something that is added to the hotspot. So this angle right here, that's added. And it's 5 here, but if I change this to 1, it's super shallow, right? And super hard edge. If I change this to 10, it falls off for quite a while, right? So it's much softer. So these are like two settings that you can mess around with and change to your liking. Usually spotlights, I don't really use them that much, but sometimes you need to. In this case, I'm just going to delete it and not work with it. Next up, we have IES light tool. Forget about it. No, not for this course. Then we have point light tool. Point light is, it's basically like a sphere light, only that it's infinitely small. So I would suggest using sphere light instead of point light. Yeah, don't use that. Dome light. I will be showing you the dome light tool in later stages. It's basically a light that wraps around your scene, just like the environment that I've shown you. It's a light that wraps around your scene and kind of uses an image to project light into your scene. So you can have some sort of a HDR image. I'm gonna talk about HDR images later on. That shines light later. Convert to mesh light. This is a pretty cool one. So let's do something about this. I will just grab a curve tool and I'll just kind of do some sort of a weird thing here. Something like that. Maybe grab these, plug them in, pull them in rather, like that. Pipe this. Sure, one by one, yeah. So I have this pipe, right? I want it to glow, a neon pipe. I want it to glow and be all neon and stuff. Oh, and it even crosses the box. We'll investigate what happens when it crosses the box. So I will select this pipe. I will go to my lights. I'll choose convert to mesh light. Click. That's it. It's done. Now it's a light. So that means that the settings for this pipe can be located here where it says mesh light. I will just rename it to pipe. or well, pipe doesn't really, pipe light, and I will say neon pink, of course, intensity 100, of course. We want it to glow like crazy, and let's render it out. Bam, neon pink glowing thing. The intensity of it is not that great, so let me make it a little bit bright. Yeah, that's good. So if you make it a bit brighter, it's going to have larger intensity because dark colors don't shine light that well. That's just the basics of it. So we have our neon light, and it does work with intersections quite well as well. So that's cool, I guess. That's cool. You can also kind of make it invisible and whatnot if you want to, you know, in the render. Right. A bunch of lights. What's next? Sun. Okay, sunlight. Let's do sunlight once we are going to start doing the actual building, rendering out the actual building. Because sunlight in this scene is going to be ridiculous. It's going to look stupid. And directional light is basically sunlight, but with more control. You don't really want it in this case. Directional light is useful when you're trying to render out like the moon, for instance. You know, some sort of a environment in the moon. Then directional light is actually quite useful, and you can do some really cool stuff with it. But for here, whatever. So those are lights. Let me just grab some coffee. I'm choking here. With using just rectangular lights, sphere lights, and mesh lights, you can light any kind of scene. Well, okay. Spotlights are also quite useful in some cases, but with these three, you can light almost any kind of scene in any way you want. Really, really nice. The only thing is simulating sunlight, and for that we will just use Rhino document sun, but that's later. Okay, materials. Let's jump into materials, right? So I'll go to Vray asset editor, and let's we have so many boxes here. Okay, let's start working with materials. So first things first, you can have, how do I explain this? You can have a material library, and you can use a default material library. So when you're in the materials tab and you click on this icon here, this left-hand side icon here, and expand it, it's going to open up a material library for you, which has materials. You expand those, and these are all of the different kinds of materials. So you can find, you know, stuff that you might want. Keep in mind, material library is quite shitty in its quality. Right? It's not that good. It's good for kind of basic checking of, you know, how the thing is going to look like, but for final renders, I dislike it quite a bit. It's much better to create your own, and I will be showing how to create your own materials. But for material library, the way you work with it is basically select a box, or not, don't even select a box, just go to, let's say, carpet, sure. Let's do carpet. Carpet, drag it in here. Now this is kind of loaded into your materials slot, and select the geometry on which you want to apply the carpet, apply to selection, you have your carpet, click the render button, carpet is applied here, and you can see that the tiling of it is bad, right? It's way too big, the texture is way too big. So this is where we kind of start talking about using the correct UVW mapping for the geometries. And this is a big thing. So just focus up a bit. If I select this shape right now, and I go to its properties, and I choose texture mapping here, I can see this list here of stuff that I can change in terms of its texture mapping, how a texture is applied to this particular box. And here are all of the different kinds of ways of how a texture can be projected on my shapes, right? So in most cases in architecture, you use box mapping, which basically just takes your geometry, takes a box, imaginary box, and it just projects the texture from the size of the box onto your geometry. So it wraps your geometry with a texture as if it was projecting it on from a box that is surrounding the geometry. So that is going to be box mapping. I can, I still have this selected, right? So I can click on apply box mapping here, like that. It's going to start asking me questions, right? So the way I like to work with this is I like to just hit enter until it stops asking me questions. So enter, enter, enter. That's it. 3 enters and you're good to go. So basically, to quickly explain what 3 enters did was, with the first enter, I said that, yo, I don't want to draw a box. That's whatever. Just give me a bounding box of the shape, right? Just give me that, right? That was the first enter. The second enter was, the second enter was, okay, Rhino said that I am going to give you a bounding box shape. How would you like it to be oriented? And basically I just said, yeah, oriented according to world XYZ coordinates, right? So it's what it's done, right? So the bounding box is located or rotated around the coordinate system of the world. And the third one was, is the box capped? So does it have a top and a bottom? Yes, it does. So that was the third enter. So now we have like this imaginary box, imaginary texture being shown, or imaginary box that projects the textures on our shape. And here we have a bunch of settings for it. So type is box, yes. Projection, closest point, whatever. We don't really care about most of these. What we care about is the XYZ size, these 3 icons right here. And what I like to do is I like to lock them, or wait, yeah. What I like to do is I like to click on 111, which basically, let's call it, it zeroes it out, right, to the default settings. I like to then lock it and change one of these to the size that I want. So think of it this way. If I go to my carpet here, there is one image, this image right here, that is going to kind of be repeated over and over. It's not an infinite image, right? So once the image ends, it's going to be repeated over and over. So with UVW mapping, with the size here, what we say is how big in millimeters is the image in real world, right? So here I have a pretty damn small model. It's just, let me just check distance. 71 millimeters, right? 7 centimeters. So of course the texture is going to be too big by default. That's natural. But what I can do is I can kind of lie a bit, and I can say, yo, okay, so the texture that you have, can you just repeat it every 35 millimeters? So I just write 35 here, and since it's locked, it kind of applies to all of these. And then if I hit render, you can see that the texture becomes tiled properly. Well, not properly, because it's now way too small according to the reality of how things are, but it is styled in a correct way. And on the other hand, I could say, yo, tile this every meter, because that's, I know that the size of this image is 1 meter because Vray, V-Ray materials have these this text by in the names of the materials, so that you know how big the material actually is. So 100 centimeters a meter. So I could say, okay, actually it's 1,000. So this is how it looks like, you know, in reality, when you have like just a 7 centimeter square of a carpet. That's bad. Let's come back to 35. All right, so that's how it works. And that's the texture. Let's just find the better one, because goddamn, the carpet is a bad example. I'll just use concrete, I think. Oops. Concrete flooring, sure. Yeah, let's just use concrete flooring, this guy right here. Drag and drop it in. Apply to selection. And the tiling is going to be like, we didn't change anything about the UVW mapping. So the tiling, we don't need to do anything else with it. It's going to take now the concrete texture and it's going to tile it instead, right? This works. This is fine. That neon tube, I will need to delete it though. It's a little bit in your face for these tests. Okay, so we have concrete here. Let's create a few materials for these boxes here. And actually one of these boxes I'll just delete and create a sphere instead. Just so that we have some sort of a different behavior in the geometry, in terms of the geometry. So first things first, let me show you how to create materials rather than just get them from the library. Because again, the library materials are kind of crappy. You saw the carpet. And I'll just delete the carpet as well. So I choose create asset. I go to materials and I'll choose generic material because that's where I want to investigate more. Generic. And this one I will call reflective black. Right? Reflective black. And who's going to be my test subject? This box. This box is going to be reflective black. I will expand this material and I'm not rendering. I don't really need to render it right now. I will apply the material, apply to selection. So it's right now, these are kind of connected. And I will work on the material by looking at its preview here rather than the render, because this is enough for me to kind of get a basic understanding of how the material is going to look like. So the first thing is black, reflective black, right? So color. I'll change the color to black. No, not really. Remember what I said before? Pay attention. It can't be black, right? I need it to be almost black, right? So this is black. This is almost black. If it's pure black, it's not gonna be accurate. There's nothing that is like the Vanta black, the blackest color that humanity has ever made, is not pure black, right? The closest thing to a pure black color is actually the sun. If you don't believe me, read up on that. In reality, like the sun as a star, that's the thing that's closest to being black, pure black color. It's just that it's very, very hot. Anyway, reflection. So we have almost black color, and then in reflection, I can work with these reflection settings to make it glossy, right? So the first thing is reflection color. So let's talk about this for a second. If reflection color is black, the geometry is not reflective at all, or the material is not reflective at all. If the reflection color is white, the material is fully reflective, right? If the reflection color is red, the material is coated in a special, it's either a metal that has this kind of a reflection, or it's coated in something that has this kind of reflection. For instance, think about it as glass Christmas toys, right? those have that kind of code to get nicer colors. But most of the materials out there, they don't have a color to their reflection except for metals and glass, right? So I'll just say reflection color pure white. You might think, if it's fully reflective, why is this not a mirror? And that's a good question. The reason for that is because this is using what's called the Fresnel reflection module. And to explain it really bluntly, every material out there, and you might know this from physics, every material out there has an index of reflection as well as index of refraction. That index is basically at what angle does the light leave the material when it's bouncing off of it, right? So by default, this is set to be 1.6 Fresnel. And 1.6 is basically glass, kinda, but it's definitely not mirror. Mirror is, I don't even remember the mirror's IOR, because there's a much better way of how to make a mirror. And it's basically just saying, yo, could you not be physically accurate and not kind of calculate Fresnel reflections and just kind of give me a full-on reflection? So you untick this and it's a mirror. That's how you do it. Let me tick it back and show you one more way of how to do it. So if Fresnel reflection is turned on, I can still go to metalness here, and I can turn on the metalness of the shape. Why you no worky? Hello, metalness? Wait, sorry. Oh yeah, with metalness I still need to mess around with the IOR. Never mind. Ignore that. So metalness 0. It's just Fresnel if you want to Fresnel turned off if you want a mirror. Yeah, that's a faster way of doing it. One more thing. So when you don't have a Fresnel turned off, there is like a 1.6 glossiness, which is close to glass. Reflection, not glossiness, reflectivity, that is close to glass. Reflection glossiness, this parameter right here, tells you how blurry the reflections are going to be. So here you can see that it's super sharp, right? If I turn down reflection glossiness to 0.6, now it's closer to being matte or this kind of shimmery, shiny material, right? If I turn this to 0.9, it's somewhere in between, right? It's a little bit blurry, but not too much. So this is reflection glossiness. In reality, you don't really have materials that have reflection glossiness lower than 0.5. I mean, if I do 0.6, it's going to be like this really weird thing right here, which is kind of almost matte, but not really matte, and it's all weird. So usually you work with something between, like typically you work between 0.6 and 1, right? In that range. In some cases you work with 0.5, but that's really niche. So I will just change this to 0.8, something like that. So it's a little bit kind of glossy. And then kind of talking about metalness, if I turn this on, this will behave like a metal. If I turn this off, this will not behave like a metal. We'll talk about this a little bit later. But for now, this is what kind of material we have, and this is applied here. So let's just render it out and see how it looks like. Yeah, that it looks exactly like we expected to look. Actually, just to make it a little bit nicer, let me apply it to the sphere as well. Because, you know, spheres are nicer, like the reflective materials look nicer on spheres. There we go. So that is done. And if I kind of keep it for longer, it's going to be better and better, but it's never going to reach high quality render level, because this is an interactive render. It's not meant to make high quality renders. It's meant to show you what's up, what you're doing interactively. So that is our reflective black. Let's create one more material, generic. And I'll call this one reflective or refractive. Let's do refractive blue. So I want a material, and it's going to be our sphere as well. I want a material that is like glass, or let's just call it glass blue. That's going to be better. Glass blue. I want a material that is glass, and it has a blue tint to it, right? So the first thing that I do is I turn the color to completely black. So remember when I said that you shouldn't have a color, let's just apply to selection just in case, where you don't have, where you never use a color that is completely black. Here I do. So what? Joking. The reason why I'm using the black color here is because it doesn't matter. Because glass is going to be fully reflective and fully refractive, right? That's why it doesn't matter. So let's go into reflection and make it fully reflective. Done. So you just change the color from black to white, and it's now fully reflective. And maybe the glossiness, I'll just bump it down to 0.95, just to give it a little bit of shimmery, right? Nothing is perfectly glossy. So 0.95, I think will give it some nice effect. So once that is done, it's not a metal. 1.6 IOR is great. We don't need to do anything else here. Let me expand the refraction tab, and here I need this to become refractive, right? Well, I just make this white. That's it. You have glass. You have successfully made glass. If I render this out, that's how it looks like, and it's let's just find a nicer angle. Is there like a nicer angle? Can I just kind of look at it from the top? Yeah, that's good enough. So it's basically like a glass ball, right? And reflective, kind of refractive, kind of catching a bunch of stuff inside of it. It's nice. It's just a nice little ball. But I said that we want it to be blue, right? And this is not blue. This material is not blue. So how do you make it blue? Well, that's the fog color. You just change the fog color. So the way I do it is you just choose, you click on the box here, and you find the color that you want, and probably something like this, and bada bing, bada boom, it's blue. Maybe it's a little bit too blue, so I just go to fog multiplier and I change this to like 0.1. So 10 times less. And now it's slightly blue. I click to render it again. It has a small bluish tint to it now. So this is how you make, how you add color. Okay, important thing. I know what you're thinking. Oh, my windows will be a little bit blue. No, they won't. Please don't. Windows don't have a fog color. Even if they do, you use something like 0.02, like almost no tint, right? But they shouldn't have any color, because it's gonna look super weird when you look through the window and everything outside looks blue. Okay, they're very, very subtle in that regard. So that's our glass. Break time. Actually, no. Let's continue. I don't want a break. So we have glass. We have reflective black material. Let's do metal. So notice how I'm not dealing with textures yet, and I'm not dealing with UVW mapping yet. That is on purpose. When you don't use an image, per se, or any kind of a texture that needs to be tiled, you don't need to deal with UVW mapping. And there's like a whole workflow out there where you can create any kind of a, do I have it here? Just a second. Where you can create any kind of material without actually using textures. And I think I have it, just bear with me for a second. Yeah, for instance, this car project right here. So this material here that I used didn't use any textures. So basically, when you look closer into it, all of this is just generated automatically in Vray without needing to use an image, right? So these bumps and this rust and these scratches, all of this is just basically noise, automatically generated noise, rather than a texture. But this kind of, oh, sorry, I lied. So there is the dust is a texture, but the dust is only on glass. But this kind of approach requires you to do a lot of let's call it next. It is next level that you would need to take to actually not work with textures. And in most cases, the time that is needed to create a material that doesn't use textures but rather generates a texture automatically is much longer than just getting a texture and getting the UVW mapping right. So there's a trade-off there. Let's create metal. So open up create a new material, again, generic, double click on that, metal, copper. Let's do copper. So metal copper, right? For this, I will actually need to go in here, IOR table, that's not table, index of refraction table. Open up here. Well, probably that's probably gonna be fine. Oh my god. Gold is 0.47. That is weird. Steel 2.5. Oh, this is alphabetical. I'm stupid. Copper 1.1. But that's weird. 1.1 is super small for a metallic piece. Well, let's try it. Let's try it out either way. 1.1. So metal copper. You will be the copper guy. Expand that. This is not metal copper. There we go. So color of it. How does this work? Now I'm thinking. I think the color of it is going to be super dark and close to being kind of brownish color, something like this. Then reflection of it is going to be full on reflective, like that. So it becomes this kind of weird. It looks weird. Metalness, of course, it's full on metal. Reflection glossiness 0.9, I think. This is just like that 0.9 part is not important. Reflection color, though, is the thing that is important. Since this is metal and it's copper, if we take a look at how it looks like, copper. So it looks like that, right? That's copper. So brown, and it does have a brownish, orangish reflection, right? Something like this. So that means that the reflections here will never be white. It's going to inherit the color of the material. So I will go and choose, I think it's warmer. No, no, it's not. No, that's bronze. That is closer to copper, and this one needs to be a little bit like that. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it, but it's something closer to this. And then IOR, I think copper was 1.1, right? Something like this. So that is copper, right? And it, you know, if I had more time, it would be nicer, but basically that's copper. Then I think I have already applied it. I can render it out. Yeah, that's a copper block right there. So we have like three different materials here. There's more than that we can work on, but I think we need to move into the actual project, and it's gonna be nicer to work with the materials in the actual project rather than in our test bench here. So finishing thoughts in this regard are I think finishing thought, rather singular, not plural. If you have a bunch of boxes and you're trying to render them out, and let me just delete the sphere, and instead of the sphere, this guy has the freaking glass. So you have one box that is reflective black, one box that is glass, one box that is copper. And you have a bunch of lights and whatnot going to town. I'll delete the sphere light. So only three lights are, not only, but three lights are shining on it. And I render this out. This will look super fake in that regard. And actually, this could be less glossy now when I think about it. So let me just apply the box 1 material, not the concrete flooring, but box 1 material on it. Yeah, this is not gonna look that great, to say the least, right? It's not gonna be that nice, and that's, you know, reasonable. That it's not great. So how do you make it great? Well, the one thing that is very important to understand is that in reality, nothing has perfectly sharp corners here. Nothing has these kind of edges that are perfectly sharp. Everything, if you look at your table edge or any kind of edge, it does have a small fillet or a small chamfer. One of those. So a fillet is rounded, chamfer is straight cut, but it's never like a perfectly sharp edge. Even edge of a blade is never perfectly sharp because it would always chip off. You know, if it always kind of came down to one atom. And I would argue that atom also has a diameter, meaning that it's still not a singular point. Anyway. So these boxes are not physically accurate, let's say it like that. How do you make them physically accurate? Well, you just use chamfer edge, casually. Chamfer edge, you choose what's the next chamfer distance. So I will click on that, next chamfer distance, and I'll say, well, here the boxes are super small, right? These are like millimeters, and if this is 7 centimeters, these are like 1 centimeter big boxes. So I'll just say my chamfer distance is going to be like 0.1 millimeters, like super small. It's all proportion based. Then I select all of these, hit enter, enter again, and it chamfers them. And the chamfers that I see here are a little bit too big still. So let me undo that and do chamfer edge again, 0.05. Twice, 2 times smaller, like that. Make sure that all of the edges are selected, enter, enter. Okay, so this is better. This is what I want to see. So you can see that it made this kind of chamfer here, right? Now if I render this out, it's a little bit better because you get this bling on the edge, right? So those chamfers start catching light, and as I'm rotating around this, Well, okay, that's a bad angle right there. Come on, catch light. Oh my god, just catch the freaking light, man. Oh yeah, okay, got it. So the reason why I'm struggling with this is because this is super intense while the other ones are less intense. So, well, you can kind of see it here. So it's catching, the edge is catching the light and it's slightly glittering. So this becomes a little bit more accurate. What the hell is going on with the box here? With this guy here? You're being weird. Let's investigate. Delete everything except the box. Take a look at it. No, that's fine. That is correct. It's just freaking out because there is not much geometry to reflect, so it's all weird and stuff. Either way, that is a small little thing, a small little detail that is easy to add that really helps you with your rendering. I will delete everything now. Stop the render here. Show. So this is my building thing, proposal project, and we're going to render this out and we're going to make it nice. So for those of you who are LTH students, those of you who are Lund students, the task for you was to find a movie that you like, analyze the scenes for it, and get an understanding, or rather get an aesthetic direction that you want to take with your renders. In my case, I will not be doing that because I don't want to, let's say I choose Blade Runner, right? And I do this kind of a Blade Runner aesthetic on this kind of a building. Then in my experience, half of the students will do freaking Blade Runner, right? And it's, I understand that now I mentioned Blade Runner, and all of you who thought about doing Blade Runner will not be doing Blade Runner, so please still do Blade Runner if you want to. It's a slippery slope. It's always a slippery slope. Anyway, I will not be following a movie aesthetic just because I don't want to influence the aesthetics that you will be making. So I'll be making kind of a default style, realistic render from this. A little bit about the model. So everything, most of the things here are just NURBS surfaces, poly surfaces, and whatnot. I have everything in layers. Why are you layer 2? No objects. Okay. Away. So I have everything in layers, and those layers are color coded. So I have the base layer, which is this guy right here. Then I have the exterior landscape layer, which is this guy right here. I have paths. Zoom in here. I have the terraces. I have the glass. So glass panels. One thing that I didn't note about the glass is this will not work. If you just have a glass as a single surface without any thickness, glass will not work. It needs to be. Let me just show you. Let me just show you. So I will start rendering. All right, we need light. Light. Let's just do a quick little rectangular light here. Just a big boy looking down. There we go. Light. And let me just do planar surface. Create a planar surface. Plop it in here. Just bear with me for a second. You don't need to follow along for sure. So that light, I want it to be invisible so that it's not in the way. Options, invisible. There we go. And for the surface, I'll use the glass blue material that I already have. Apply. And I'll just kind of try to take a look at it, and you can see how fucked up, how messed up it gets, right? So this is because it doesn't have any thickness. But if I now take the surface and use either extrude or offset, doesn't matter. I'll use extrude surface to give it thickness, just a little bit. Let's say 10 millimeters, so 1 centimeter of thickness, and delete that. And now I need to apply the material again, of course. Now this is glass, right? You can barely see it. How can I show you it? Freaking glass, come on. You can kind of see the shimmering here, can you? The shimmering here? That belongs to the glass, oh my god. I didn't think this through. Anyway, thickness matters. Thickness really matters. So please, if you have any glass elements, thicken them up. Make sure that it's closed boxes. So back to here, I have all of my glass elements in this layer here, and let me just quickly create a new layer and call it helper, just so that I can have it somewhere here. Let's just move it up. So that's going to be my other stuff is going to be located in this layer. So glass, roof. Oh, by the way, speaking of roof, if I zoom in here, you can see the chamfers. I'm hoping that the reflection will kind of create this kind of shimmery effect for the roof. So that's why I'm kind of chamfering it through and through. So that's roof. Then we have walls. We have railing, like here, railing. We have beams. We have slabs. We have furniture, which was disabled, but this is basically the furniture. I'll show you how to get furniture from the internet, so don't worry about that. But this is just basically a few meshes that I've got. Furniture, stairs, just a stairway, nothing too fancy. But this is like the focus of this this render is going to be exterior, not interior. We are going to do an interior render as well, of course, but we will not be looking at the stairs too close, so the detailing level is absolutely fine for this particular purpose, and they are correct in the way they are made. Then frames. That's the window frames. And the last thing is doors. Oh, no, not the last thing, but then doors, and then we have the shed as well. So this is like just a additional structure for the cars, and I believe a ping pong table is going to be here, if I remember correctly. And it even has a nice slope here. So that's a nice little detail for water flow. Anyway, so that is what how the layers are done. I really suggest you do a similar thing with your model, just to get all of the other steps running quite easily. So now, let me set up the light. So, okay. No, not the light. Yes, the light. No, not the light. Wait. God damn it. So the way you work with the model, there are like 3 steps. There is light, material, and camera, right? Those are the 3 main ingredients to making a nice render. So the question is, what happens first, what happens next, and what happens last? The way I work with it is usually I first create the light. No, sorry, I first create the cameras, the views. Then I create by create the cameras, I mean find the position of the camera for the different views. Then I create light, and only then do I start working on the materials, because light is super important, and when you don't have light in your scene and you're working with materials and then you add light, the output might be something that you don't really like, you don't really want. Oh, camera is dying. Wait, give me a second here. Come on, don't die on me. EOS webcam utility. So we are going to start with the camera. Speaking of which, right? We are going to start with the camera rather than the light, and then we'll move on to creating the light later on. Please work. It does work. Please work. Yes. Okay. So cameras. The way you create cameras is by using named, not named sections. God damn it, I can't write. Named view command. Enter. It will open up this box here where all of your views can be placed. So I'll just kind of anchor the box here, down here, just for now. So this is where all of my views are going to be located. And right now, what I'm going to just kind of do is find the nice views that I can work with. And for that, actually, I do need to see the render, right? The overall image of the render, because this might not have the correct proportion. So there are like steps in creating proper starting views. So I'll go to Vray Asset Editor right here. I'll go to settings, and the first thing that I'm going to change is the proportion of the render. So this is the first decision that you make about your what kind of renders you will have at the end. So it's under render output, and here you can see image size in pixels, right? So width and height. And by default, it's locked to aspect ratio of 16:9, which is the aspect ratio of your average screen, computer screen. So for instance, 16:9 is used by YouTube, Vimeo, by most of the TV shows out there, and so on. Movies, on the other hand, use aspect ratio of 3.225. Sorry, what am I saying? 2.25 by 1. Or what was the other one? 2.39 by 1. One is called anamorphic camera, I think. Let's see. Anamorphic lens. Yes, anamorphic lens format. It's a 35mm lens, and the format for it is that's gonna take too long. I'm not gonna waste time. Basically, cinema aspect ratios, like that, and you find here that's a very crappy one. Here, there we go. So we have like 16:9. So this is like the HD TV proportion, and then we have 1.85 by 1. That's the widescreen version, and then we have 2.35 by 1. That's the CinemaScope version, and the one that I said, the 2.25 by 1, is the anamorphic lens version. So my suggestion would be not to go full ham and go 2.35 by 1, because that is a very broad aspect ratio, but 1.85 by 1 I think is pretty nice. It's a little bit wider, it's a little bit nicer. So using that, I think it's gonna be pretty cool. But it's up to you. You can do 4:3, you know, the old TV proportion as well. So the aspect ratio is changed here under aspect ratio. If you drop down this, you can see square, picture, landscape. So these are like the basic ones, but you can use custom, and that's the important one. So if you choose custom, here you can change the aspect width and height. So I can say, let me show you 2.35 by 1, right? And click render. Oh, right. I can't show you because I deleted the lights, goddammit. But the proportion of it is going to be like this, and it's a little bit too white for my taste. So I'll tone it down to 1.85 by 1. So the proportion is going to be like this, and it's a bit better, right? Let me actually go into the environment tab and turn on that texture that we used right at the start, remember? I'll turn on that texture and click the interactive render button, just so that I can see my geometry, right? And I don't need to mess around with the lights for now, at least. So I get this kind of image here, this kind of preview of what I can expect, and I don't really need to see this. What I can expect, and now what I'm going to do is I'll just rotate around my my view here and try to find a nice nice composition for this to work. So I'm not really looking at the site itself. Sorry, at the 3D model itself. I'm looking at the render when I'm trying to find a nice view. Something like that, maybe. So it's gonna take a while, as you can probably tell right now. But I think this kind of a composition is fine. Maybe there's one thing that I want to kind of show you how to change as well. And that thing is called camera lens angle, or not the angle, the millimeters. So camera lens millimeters. The one that I have here, actually I can show you with this. Bam. There we go. Oh, beautiful. I can show you with this. So this camera lens is between 18 and 55 millimeters, right? So if I do this, oh my God, no, no. If I do this, this is 18 millimeters. If I do this, this is no, sorry, this is 18 millimeters. So it's zoomed out, and this is 55 millimeters. Let's not look at my neck. Anyway, so that is a lens that goes between 18 and 55 millimeters. By default, if you don't have anything selected here in your Rhino scene and you go to properties, the default lens length here is 55 millimeters, right? So the difference between lenses or lens lengths is the higher the number here, the more of an axonometric view you will have, less distortion you will have, but also things will be zoomed in much more. The smaller millimeter amount you have, the more things are going to be zoomed out, but more distortion, fisheye lens effect you will have. So for instance, if I change this to 15, super zoomed out, right? While the camera, I didn't change the position of the camera. I didn't zoom out, right? It's just the lens that is much more, you can even see the fish eye effect here. If I kind of look at it, it's all kind of super perspective-y, right? On the other hand, if I change this to, what's the lens that I have that's the biggest? I think I have like 120 millimeter lens. Oh, that's 230. 120 millimeter lens. And for that, I need to zoom out quite a bit. See how axonometric this looks, right? So that is 120 millimeter lens. And it looks super axonometric in that regard. Right, so in doing so, you can kind of find the balance that works for you. For this, I will use something like 70 millimeter lens, I think. I'll just continue searching for a nice angle. Usually, you want to be close to the eye level, as if you were standing on the ground. That will make it more realistic. Let's say this is 1/3, this is 1/3. I think that's like half. Maybe we can kind of do something like this. Up. Yeah, I think that's gonna work, right? So this is what I'm gonna be working with in this view right here. So once I have the view kind of focused on, I can just go to named views and click on the save as icon here and just type in view, or I'll call it X1, exterior 1. Hit OK. And now I can see that my view here has been renamed to exterior 1. It has been saved here. Perfect. So I'm going to kind of continue on working with this, and I'll find more views, right? I'll find more views. So for instance, for this guy right here, I want the lens length to be like 30 millimeters, and this to be much more pronounced, right? Much more in your face type of a render. So I'm using like exaggerated perspective for it. Let me render it out to see how it looks like. And I know it right now looks like complete garbage, but there's no light, there's no materials, there's no nothing. It's gonna look better. Eventually, it's gonna look better. So we have something like that we can work with. Maybe the lens length could be 22. And we zoom in. Yeah. Central composition, all of that is good. But notice how this line here, as well as this line here, they're kind of tapering upwards too much. This happens because there's like a third vanishing point in the top because of the fisheye lens effect. I can fix that. And the way I fix that is by going to projection here and choosing, instead of perspective, choosing 2-point perspective. And then, of course, recalibrating everything. So what 2-point perspective will do is it will force all of the vertical lines to be vertical, right? That's just what it does. But you might end up having some issues with it later down the line. The issues usually arise. I will show you. First, I want to find a nice angle here. Are you in the center? I can't tell if it's in the center. It looks like it's in the center. Yeah, looks fine. Maybe we can kind of take a look at it like so, even further. Yeah, something like that. Oops. Okay, that's fine. That's good enough. I can adjust these views later, but that is going to be my exterior 2. And these are like 2 views that I'm going to kind of work on for now, and we will kind of, because right now I'm focusing on the exterior of the render or of the building. So I will be creating new views for the interior later on, right? So for now, it's just the exterior. And this is how it looks like. I think that's fine. So those are 2 views. Let's do one more. Let's do one more view. And this one is going to be done with just a regular perspective. Lens length 50 millimeters. That's perfect. And let's just look at it from the side, maybe 2/3. Nah, let's do a side render. start rendering it out. I just want to see if this will fit. Hopefully it will. Not really. This will not fit, so I'm going to take a look at it from here. And we're gonna make something nice with this little building here, maybe something like that. One more thing that you can do is, if here you kind of want to get into nitty-gritty of the camera placement, you can type in camera and you can choose to show, and then your camera is going to be shown. Well, it's going to crash apparently. There we go. Oh yeah, that's why it's crashing. It's trying to show too many things. Your camera is going to be shown in every view. So that means you can take the camera and you can kind of move it around, and it's going to update here, right? But I would suggest not kind of doing it too much, because you might mess it up quite a bit. I think this is fine. I think this we can work with this. So I'll just stop the render. Make sure that you are, by the way, in the correct view. I will just click on the save icon and I'll change the name to exterior 3. And if you want to get rid of the camera now, you can just type, go to the correct view, by the way, exterior 3, type in camera and choose to hide. And now it's going to be hidden in every other view. Okay, we have 3 exterior views. Let's start dealing with the light, and with that we will call it a day for this particular tutorial. We'll move on to more settings and more cool stuff in the next tutorial. So light. For this particular lighting scenario, I'm thinking about, here I'm just going to show you Rhino document sun, because that's something that we skipped. And I will also probably show you dome light. So first of all, Rhino document sun. The way you enable it is you go to sun, you type in sun, hit enter, and you turn it on. That was easy, right? You turn it on, and then what I like to do is I like to turn on manual control rather than controlling it through the geography. So manual control. And now we have 2 handles here. The position of the light, not the position, but how high is it above the horizon, and where is it shining from. So let's start with exterior 1, right? Oh, by the way, in named views, I can just now double click on the different icons and switch between the views. That's the nice thing about it. So exterior 1, right? I have the sunlight turned on, and I'll click the render button, interactive render button. And now look at the pretty nuclear explosion that we're gonna get. Just white, you know, it's super over bright. So there are a few things that I need to change. First of all, this has nothing to do with sun, right? The environment, it's just gray environment. So I need to change that texture to be a sky texture that reacts to the position of the sun. Seems difficult, is actually really simple. Also, I need to make this much darker. So there are 2 things that I need to change. First of all, let's make it darker. So I'll go to camera and exposure value. I'll change this to, let's do 14 for now. Hit that render button again. Or maybe I should just kind of keep rendering, stay in the interactive render. So this is with 14. Right? You start seeing the shadows appear and so on, right? But it looks like the freaking moon, right? The sunlight in the freaking moon. The reason for that is, well, first of all, we don't have the sky, so there's no blue in it, but it's only half of the truth. the reality of it is, and this is very important, so again, listen up. Reality of it is the fucking, shouldn't swear, the freaking sun is warm light. So it produces warm light, right? This kind of a orange light. The sky, in our case, is filled with gases, ozone layer, all of that jazz. So when the sunlight is bouncing off from the ground back into the sky and bouncing back from the ozone layer back into the ground, those gases make it look like the sky is blue, right? Which means that the light that bounces off from the ozone layer back to the world, back to the ground level, gets a cold tint, a blue color, right? Which always balances out the shadows, right? So we always have the sunlight that is orange. Well, to a certain extent, it's orange. It's warm light. And we have the shadows, which receive indirect light just from the scattered light from the ozone layer, which receives that indirect light. And that scattered light is cold, it's blue. If you look at any kind of traditional painting, except for Rembrandt because he liked candles and indoors, but except for him, for outside, traditional outside painting, you will notice that the color range that the painter uses in traditional painting, very important to note, is warm for parts that are being hit by the sun, by the light, by direct light, and cold for the parts that are in the shadow. This is to mimic this kind of behavior. In our case, in our render, we have sunlight that is warm, but we have no environment that would scatter the cold light back into the model, right? So it's just warm over warm over warm, so everything looks orange, right? So here, under Environment tab, in the background, I have this texture slot, right? And it's using that ugly texture that we had, which we don't even see anymore because we changed the camera exposure value, so the texture is too dark. I am going to get rid of it. So to get rid of it, you just right-click on it and choose Clear. Easy. Clear. Now it's gone. Nothing really changes because it was too dark either way. Now it's using the black color. I could kind of say, well, just use the blue color now and be more aggressive, right? And like I could kind of balance it out this way, but this is super stupid. So let's not do that. Let me default back to how it was. Instead, we will use a texture, right? And not any kind of texture, but a generated one, one that Rhino automatically or Vray automatically generates from the position of the light. So I will click on this checker box icon here. I'll choose sky in the texture list, sky. There are different things that you can kind of plug in here, but sky is the one that you want. Bam. That's it. Now you have the sky and you have the sunlight. And the materials are all pure white, so it still looks like crap, but at least now it's an accurate crap, if that makes sense. So there are a few more things that I need to change. Right now, this is fine. I could kind of go in here and change the exposure value to like 16 to make it even, oh, no, 15. To make it a little bit darker, but I don't care. 14.5. Let's go. This is fine. Instead, I want to actually see where the windows are, because that's I feel like that is going to kind of dictate quite a bit the angle of the light that I will want for this scene. So I'll stop the render for a bit. I'll go to my layers, and this is why I have everything in layers. I'll go to my layers and I'll choose glass, I'll right click on it, and I'll choose select objects. So all of my objects that are in the Rhino file that are in glass will be selected. And then I'll go to Vray Asset Editor, open up the Materials tab, and I'll already have glass blue here, but let me just create a new one. I'll just kind of, let me actually delete all of these. So I'll just kind of I'll just delete all of the ones that we used so far, just so that it doesn't get too cluttered. Blank, blank, blank. Okay. Create new materials, generic, double click, glass. I'll be faster and faster every time and I'll say less every time I create like a material that I've already shown. So just slow it down if you need a refresher. Slow down the video if you need a refresher. So that's my glass, and the fog color, I will not be messing around the fog color. Maybe the glossiness can be like 0.98, a little bit glossy. And I'll just apply that glass material to my selection. And now if I click on the render again, real-time render, I mean. If I click on that again, compiling, it's trying its best. There we go. So there's glass here, right? Glass here, so we can see what's happening inside. That's nice. That's nice. So we can now work with the light in a little bit more accurate way, because we'll see how much light is being shined inside of the space. So now I can, when I have if you close the sunlight toolbox, you just type in sun again and have it opened. You can even dock it somewhere here, for instance. Doesn't matter. I usually just like to have it floating around, and if I need to, I close it. If I need to, I open it up again. So sun position, let's mess around with it. I want maybe evening, and it comes from the west. Does it come from the west? I don't know. It looks fine if it's coming from the west, but maybe the angle. So I'm looking at mostly at stuff that's being lit up by the light inside, inside of my model. So what happens if it comes from here? It crashes. It doesn't crash, but it's not updating. So let me stop the render, re-render it again. Oh, Rhino, why are you doing this to me? Why are you like this? There we go. Okay, so now it's working. Back to light. West. North. Well, maybe not north. East. So east looks bad. South is that away. So west is something that we will want to work with. And my thoughts are maybe a little bit lower, a little bit something like that, and a little bit more towards west. Oh, a little bit less. And altitude could be like 23. You can use numbers as well. And 230. So this will receive a lot of light, but that's fine. That's okay. We will balance it out with the materials. So this is the light that we get for this particular scene. And I can see 230 by 23. So each scene will have a different light angle. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll take a piece of paper and I will write it down. So I will write down EXT1, that's my camera, has sunlight of 230 degrees, 23 degrees. That's it. So I just write it down, I have it somewhere here. every time when I'll be working on the scene, I know the angle of the light. Let's continue. Stop that. Find another, and now I'm going to be faster, right, with this. So exterior 2, sun, hit that render button. This one I kind of want to have in the shadow, probably. So let's see what kind of a nice shadow we can get. Oh, that's actually nice. No, I don't want to change anything about this. Okay, so exterior 1 and exterior 2, comma 2 are going to have the same angle. So that's good. That saves time. And exterior 3, render. So you need to stop the render when you're changing the views and start the render again, but that's not a problem. So exterior 3, I'm just writing it down with my pen, has this kind of angle, and it's not that bad, but I think we can kind of make it a little bit nicer if we change it up to something like this, maybe, so that there's a bunch of light coming in from the corner here. Let's just use full numbers, 120. So maybe that's gonna be nice, because it will catch a bunch of light here, and there's gonna be this kind of shadow. I think that's gonna look good. So let's do this. So it's gonna be 120 degrees, comma 23. So it's going to have the same height, but it's going to be the morning light, right? Because it comes from the east, and the other ones come from the west. So exterior 3 is morning. Exterior 1 and 2 is evening. I also like to write that down just to kind of know what kind of feel I'm aiming towards. So we have the lights here done. Let me show you how to do it in a different way. And some of you might want to, some of you might not. I personally like using this technique. I think it's great, but there's also another technique which incorporates an HDRI image. So an HDRI image is basically, HDR stands for high dynamic range. It's basically an image that has multiple layers in it, which have been shot with different exposure values with the camera. So if I look, let me just show you, HDR image. There's like an example of it. Come on, just give me an. Really? No. Oh, well, that's pretty close. That's pretty close to what I want to show. So, kinda. Can you see it here? See how this is brighter than this? Right? This image is brighter than this. This, all of this is the same image, right? It's one big image, but it has information on color behavior when you change the brightness, and that is why it's high dynamic range, right? So these are like the layers that make up the HDR image. That's a long way of saying it, but basically what it enables you to do is enables you to have an image that contains light information, and then from that light information you can shine light back into your render. So if we go to HDR Haven, or HDRI Haven, not Heaven, Haven.com, and you go to HDR Eyes, here we can kind of find a nice one. So for instance, skies, let's go for skies, and let's just find something that we might use. So there's like foggy ones, there's like daytime ones and whatnot, cloudy ones. So I'll just use sunflowers, sure, whatever. I'll just use this one. And here, when I scroll down, I can see what kind of size I will download it at. So never do 16K, that's stupid. Just don't. Either 4K or 8K will do the trick for sure. I will be using 4K because my computer is not that fast, so I can't afford to do 8K HDRI lighting. If your computer is pretty beefy, pretty strong, you can work with 8K, but I don't see any benefit of it. I mean, if you're a beginner in Vray, there's other stuff that will screw you over rather than not having enough resolution for the HDRI image. Anyway, I have it downloaded. It's right here, Sunflowers 4K. I'll just go to desktop and I will probably just paste it here. Or rather, let me go to my to the folder where I have my my file. So this is the file that I'm working on, or rather, this is the file that I'm working on, and I'll just create a new folder, and I'll call that folder HDRI. Just to keep things clean, and paste it here. So now I know where it lives, right? Where I have my image. Let's go. So let me turn off. Oh, sorry. So now to shine a different kind of light, I have written down the sunlight and I'll be using that, but to shine the scene with a different kind of light, the HDRI one, we will turn off the sun. So that is turned off. And we will go into the settings, background, and we will turn off the background texture. So we turned off the sun and we turned off the sky. Right? So now it's going to be, if I render it, it's going to be completely black again, right? Because there is no light. So we start from scratch in that regard, right? Even though it's going to be, yeah, it's black. Even though it's going to be very easy for us to turn it back on if we need to. Either way. To use an HDRI image, you go to the V-Ray lights and you choose dome light. Dome light. Right here, choose that, and just I usually like to just kind of have it placed somewhere near my model. So you just click on any kind of snapping area near your model, wherever it snaps. It doesn't matter where it is placed, right? It's infinite. The dome light is infinite in its size. So it doesn't matter where you place it on your scene. So I just placed it somewhere near my model. The only thing why you even have an icon for it is to access its settings, right? So you sometimes want to kind of just click on the icon in the view, right? And then you will access its settings and you can change things quickly. Other than that, it's an infinite thing, so it doesn't even need an icon. It doesn't matter where you place it. Okay, HDRI. Once you place it, it's going to ask you to give it an image immediately. That's what it's going to ask. So you just find your downloaded image, hit open, and it's going to kind of use it here. So you can't see it. Let me place it somewhere else where you actually can. So it's going to create this kind of a view here, and let me, which view will we sacrifice? Let's sacrifice the right view. I'll change this to perspective so that I don't need to mess around with my camera views here. Perspective, zoom into this, zoom selected. It looks like that. It's a dome light, and I'll probably make it bigger. So you can make it bigger as well, like that. Just so that it's easier for you to select it. So I'm holding down the shift key and just kind of scaling it up. But it's basically just an icon. So we have that, right? We have this little guy here, and why is just a second, C-planes, world top, there we go. So we have this little guy right here, and it has that texture. So let's see how it renders out. So I'll make this my active viewport. I will hit that render button here. Let's see, and it's black. And the reason why it's black, okay, it's not that black, but it's pretty black. The reason why it's pretty black is because the light is too dim from the HDRI. So it's really easy to fix. You just go to camera settings, like Vray asset editor settings, camera settings, and here exposure value. Let me just write it down, what I had before. Exposure 14.5. Okay. So then you mess around with the exposure value. 14.5. Nah, let's do 8. Let's not do 8. Let's do 10. Yeah, okay, good. So this is an HDRI that is lighting our scene. And the way we work with it is you can't change the height of the light of the sun, because it's just an image that is being wrapped around, right? So the height is locked, but what you can do is you can kind of rotate the image around the center point of your scene. So you can go in here, let me close that. You can go in here to this icon, HDRI icon, and somehow select it. There we go. And then you can rotate it, right? And once you rotate it, it's going to rotate the sun here. Well, it's going to rotate the whole damn texture, and the sun will follow, of course, the texture, right? So this is how you work with an HDRI image. Some people love it. I don't mind it. It's fine to work with it. It's just that I get more flexibility when I use Vray document sun rather than HDRI. And adding clouds, if you really want clouds and so on, later. And in Photoshop, it's super easy to add them, so don't worry about not having clouds right now. It's gonna be very easy to add them. So yeah, so that's the choice that you have, either HDRI or sunlight. Make that choice now. Much better to kind of to be done with the choices in terms of lighting before you move on to the next step. So let me turn on the sun options, open those up. Sun is turned on. Let me go back to settings, turn on the environment, and change this to 14.5, the exposure value. Render it out to double check to make sure that it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. So that looks okay. That looks a-okay. We will make it nicer, I promise, later. So one more thing. HDRI, from the get-go, HDRI produces a more natural looking light than the Vray document sun. But that is something that we will be able to fix and adjust later down the line. I will maybe make... Let's say it like that. So exterior 3, this view right here, I will make it with the HDRI image, just so that I'm a little bit more pedagogical in showing you both ways of how to do it. So that is going to be HDRI, and I have already hidden the HDRI, so let me show. No, I haven't hidden it, I deleted it. So let me undelete it. So it's right here as it was. And so this guy right here will be done with HDRI, and we will be using exposure value of 10. Was it not? Why are you not rendering? Hello, please render. Just render. There we go. So 10 for now. I will probably switch it to something else later down the line. So our HDRI will look like that, but I kind of want to have it rotated a bit more. And why am I struggling with selecting the freaking HDRI dome? There we go. A bit more, please. Because I want it similar to what I had before with the sunlight. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so something like this will definitely do the trick. Okay, that is that. So the task for after day 1 of our tutorials, the task for you is to find the angles from which you are going to render out your building, and to start implementing the sunlight, the direction of the sun, how you want the shadows to flow, what kind of a dark versus bright composition you want to have, and all of that. Once you have done that, then in the next tutorial, we'll move into materials. We'll move into materials and start assigning different kinds of materials to your model. So, see you then. And for now, start working. Bye.